This is Russia, the 9th largest economy in the world, which has shaken the entire world. But the biggest threat to this Russia is NATO. NATO, also known as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is actually an agreement between the United States and 30 European countries to jointly defend each other's freedom and security. This means that if any of these 30 countries are attacked, all the countries will collectively defend it. But this alliance is about to face a huge setback very soon. NATO has a significant weakness that will make it very vulnerable compared to Russia. If we look at the North Atlantic Ocean, there is an island that ruled the entire world for almost 400 years. This island, in collaboration with the United States, laid the foundation of NATO. This island is known as the Great Britain, the United Kingdom, England, or the UK. The UK is currently going through the worst crisis in its history. The UK's debts have doubled. The energy crisis has intensified, and restaurants and pubs are shutting down. The inflation rate in the UK is currently the highest in the last 40 years, and the biggest threat looming over the UK is Scotland's independence. In 2014, the UK government allowed Scotland to hold a referendum for independence. At that time, the UK was part of the European Union, and 55% of Scotland's people voted to remain in the UK. However, after the UK left the European Union in 2016, 62% of people in Scotland voted in a referendum that they wanted to remain part of the European Union. But since the votes from England and Wales were slightly more than those from Scotland, Britain left the European Union. Now, since Scotland is considered part of the UK, it automatically exited the European Union even though the majority in Scotland wanted to remain part of the European Union. The only way for Scotland to rejoin the European Union is to separate from Britain. But now the real question is, what difference does it make to NATO if Scotland separates? And why are experts saying that if Scotland separates from the UK, not only could the UK be devastated, but NATO's power would also be severely compromised? So why is Scotland so important to the UK and NATO? In fact, if I say that Scotland is NATO's biggest weakness, it would not be wrong. But why is that? Why has Scotland become a nightmare for the UK and NATO? Let's find out in this video. First, let's answer the question of what impact Scotland's separation would have on the UK. Scotland possesses a part of the sea known as the North Sea, which contains the 31st largest oil reserves in the world. The UK meets 90% of its oil requirements from the oil extracted from the North Sea and only has to import 10% of its oil from abroad. Because of these oil reserves, the UK is not dependent on any external country for its energy requirements compared to other European countries. This is why the UK did not face the same severity of the energy crisis after the Russia-Ukraine war as Germany and other European countries did. For example, Germany imports 50% of its gas and 40% of its oil from Russia, whereas the UK imports only 4% of its gas and 9% of its oil from Russia. This is why the UK easily imposed import sanctions on Russia when it attacked Ukraine. But now the biggest question is, what will happen to these oil reserves if Scotland separates from the UK? If Scotland separates from the UK, it will take Britain's entire domestic oil industry with it because, as an independent country, Scotland will have the right to its own maritime economic zone, technically known as the EEZ or Exclusive Economic Zone, and the zone would look something like this. Scotland would have rights over all the resources found in this zone, and if we look at the distribution of the UK's oil and gas reserves, they would be something like this after the separation. So we can see that about 95% of the UK's oil reserves would come under Scotland's control, and then Scotland could do whatever it wants with these resources. Another important thing here is that the oil reserves found in the North Sea are depleting rapidly, and it is possible that Scotland might stop exporting oil to the UK to conserve them. The biggest loss from this would be that the UK would have to turn to other countries for its energy requirements, losing the competitive advantage it had over other European countries. Since the Russia-Ukraine war, the price of oil has been steadily rising, and as a result, the profits of the UK's oil industry have doubled. This has further motivated Scotland to seek independence because the majority of the oil is being extracted from Scottish waters, and its profits are going to the UK. Similarly, another threat to the UK is that if Scotland separates, there is a high chance that Northern Ireland will also raise its voice for independence. In this way, the Great British Empire could be reduced to just England and Wales within a few years. Now let's address the second question. What impact does Scotland's separation have on NATO? If Scotland separates from the UK, it will have two choices. The first option is to reapply for NATO membership, which would involve going through a lengthy bureaucratic process. The second option is to remain neutral, like Ireland, and not become a part of NATO. In both scenarios, NATO suffers a loss. The fact is that there are many British military bases in northern and southern Scotland, such as Lossiemouth Base, Luchas Base, and Cummings Bay Base, and through these bases, the UK protects its borders from any external threat. The most important of these bases is Lossiemouth, because it is from here that Russian jets pass and keep an eye on all of Europe. In fact, when Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, Russian Air Force planes frequently passed this route, and the British Air Force repeatedly intercepted these jets through this base. But if Scotland becomes independent, there is a high chance it will ask Britain to vacate these bases, severely compromising the UK's air defence. But the issue doesn't end there. An even more dangerous aspect for NATO is the submarine base known as Fastlane. There is no more important naval base in this entire region because this is where the UK's nuclear submarines are located. And in the event of any nuclear attack, this is the base that can save the UK. The location of this base was strategically chosen during the Cold War. This base is actually near the GI-UK gap. The GI-UK gap is one of the most important areas in the world's seas, because this is the area through which Russian submarines can pass to attack the United States, Canada, and Europe. In fact, Russia's largest naval base is Severomorsk, located in the north of Russia, and it is also the headquarters of the Russian Northern Fleet. 11 Russian nuclear submarines are stationed around this base. On the left side of this base is all ice, and this is the only route for Russian submarines to attack the United States and Europe. 4 Russian nuclear submarines patrol this GI-UK area at all times, and the UK, through this base, keeps a close watch on this entire sea area to protect itself from any nuclear threat. But if Scotland separates from the UK, this entire flank will be left completely empty, because in 2014, the Scottish government put forth the condition in the referendum that if they won the vote, they would have Britain vacate Fastlane and other bases. So, Scotland's independence would mean that the UK would have to build new bases elsewhere, costing billions of pounds, and even after spending so much money, it would be difficult to find such excellent locations for bases. At most, NATO could build such bases either in France or the USA, and both these countries are far from the GI-UK gap. These bases are also necessary because in September 2022, Vladimir Putin's advisor threatened on TV that if the UK did not lift sanctions on Russia and did not change its aggressive stance against Russia, Russian nuclear missiles could target London. And exactly 1 year before this threat, there was a debate in the UK about whether the UK still needed nuclear weapons because no one would launch a nuclear attack on the UK anymore. But after Russia's threat, these nuclear bases have once again become a very big necessity for both the UK and NATO. And this is why negotiations are ongoing with Scotland to revoke their decision for independence. But for now, it doesn't seem likely. Another major loss from Scotland's independence would be in terms of communication. In fact, 95% of the world's internet cables lie in this part of the Atlantic Ocean. Through these cables, all continents are connected. We use the internet, and through these communication lines, America communicates with its soldiers in Europe and Asia. So if these bases fall out of the UK's hands, there is a high chance that Russian submarines will cut these communication lines, and this has happened in the past. In January 2022, about a month before Russia's attack on Ukraine, fiber optic cables between the Norwegian mainland and Svalbard Island were mysteriously cut. Svalbard Island hosts the world's largest satellite ground station, where Western agencies monitor Russia's military advancements. And just a few days earlier, Norwegian intelligence had detected Russian submarines in this part of the sea. So, in the event of Scotland's separation, the communication lines between Europe and America would also be compromised. And these are all the reasons why Scotland is the biggest weakness for both NATO and the UK, and its independence could cause significant damage to both. These are all the sources we consulted for this video. If you liked this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel because we are bringing many interesting topics and we hope you will enjoy them. See you in the next video. Take care.